Welcome to Call Your Hits, a Storm Riders Airsoft podcast. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Today's episode is going to be a This or That with Phil and Pat, an old fan favorite where we look at some fictional choice scenarios, some difficult situations, etc., and discuss which we'd rather be faced and sort of why. Before we dive into it, I just want to give a huge shout out to everyone who has been supporting our channel and our content, whether it's by engaging with it in the YouTube comments, either by liking our videos, checking out our merch, or even becoming channel members like Hans has. All of these things make it possible for us to keep making the type of content we want to be making and that you seem to all value. So a big thank you to all of you, and we hope you love the show today. So let's dive in. So Pat, the first question that I have for you is a bit of a tougher one, at least I think so.
You're going to ask me if I would quit Warhammer or play Airsoft. That's...
Oh, well, how did you know? No, nothing so silly. However, it is... Would you rather have to play Airsoft using a 3-point sling or no sling at all?
Oh, God. I hate both of these options.
Yeah.
Like, hey, Pat, we have a choice here, yes? I'd like neither. No.
Yeah.
I'll still
like
take
I said, it's a tough one.
I'll still take the 3-point sling over
Really?
no sling.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I should qualify. It's like I've definitely run the LMG without a sling. And like that is really, if I'm being honest, against my better judgment at this point.
Yeah.
But just because there were a couple of times this summer where I was like testing it and, you know, running it for a game or whatever, and I just was too lazy to go get the sling from the M27.
Yeah, fair enough.
You know, don't do what Pat does, kids. This is not a new rule. But yeah, in particular with the M27, like it's tuned so carefully and it's built so well that like dropping it is definitely not a thing I want to be doing if I can possibly avoid it. So
Certainly.
yeah, I'll take the 3-point. And I mean, even exempting like specific pieces of kit that I, you know, might attach it to, just, you know, you can still use a 3-point to brace your hand and to give you that sort of additional stability. Plus it gives you the ability to sling the rifle to do stuff. And I mean, increasingly over the summer, especially, we like added new, and interesting kinds of objective play and stuff like that. So the value of having it went up for us this year. And I already frankly thought the value of having a sling was do it, right? Like,
yeah.
You know,
this is why I think sort of this question is so tough. And I think when I was thinking about this question, I was like, this is a tough one because we talk a lot about how useful slings are in a variety of ways, and especially 2-point slings in terms of being able, like you were just saying, being able to throw it on your back so that you have your hands free, being able to release your replica from both hands if you need to draw a sidearm or to untangle your whatever it is, right? And also as a shooting aid, I think there's absolute value in being able to stabilize your replica, stabilize your shooting hand by, you know, wrapping your hand around it with a 2-point, etc. And in terms of fatigue as well, and I think the 3-point certainly can help with some of that, but it's just so bad, right? Like,
I mean, I find them really clumsy. You know, it's definitely like I would pick a 1-point first for sure. You know, I ran one of those for ages. I ran one with my M16, so like the M27's not gonna bother me lengthwise there.
Yeah.
It's not as easy to handle. It's definitely not as good. Like I have a really, you know, at this point, you know, opinion bias, I don't know. I have a really strong view that I really, really like the 2-point that I'm using. You know, you'd have to work very hard to convince me to even bother trying another sling.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, maybe not work very hard. Like if one of our guys showed up, ran it for a couple of weeks and was like, hey, this is really good, you should give it a shot just for the sake of it. I mean, I'll try stuff for the sake of the fun of it.
Yeah.
But like,
and I mean, like,
you know,
how,
if you're trying to
realistically, how meaningfully better could it be? Right? Like if you think about what our sling does. Like we use the Faro Concept Slingster, not a sponsor, obviously, clearly, but like
But
I
if
think
you're
there's a
listening,
Vickers. Yeah, I highly doubt that they are, to be honest. But regardless, like if Vickers is a sling, or the Viking, like the Vickers sling, or the Viking sling, or whatever, like they're adjustable 2 points. I think they pretty much all function the same way. It's just yours is, I think, the Gen 1. I might have the Gen 2. There might be so it's a different, like a better mechanism, but like fundamentally, like I don't think it's not going to be as groundbreaking, I guess, is where I'm going with this, compared to going from a single point sling to a 2 point sling, right?
yeah, definitely. And like we both have 2 points that are sort of very modern 2 points with the slide toggle. So like they're unless someone comes out with a new kind of 2 point sling that does something that isn't engaged there, I think I'm pretty content.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've used 3 points on other people's gear, and I can't say that I like them.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, I don't use one. If I liked them, I'd have bought one. But yeah, I find them pretty clunky. But there are a bunch of replicas that I've run that, like, I mean, honestly, at this point, including the 249, like when I over the summer, it was like, oh, it's not working quite right. Like if I drop it, what's it gonna do? Knock it into working?
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
but at this point,
But
it's like, yeah, no,
yeah.
she does the thing. We'd like you to keep doing the thing. We're not gonna mess around with that by dropping it, right?
But to be honest, like you look at Cal doesn't use a sling, right? Anytime we've done a training, like a training day or whatever, he's not using a sling on his replica, and um, he's been fine with that. I think some of the guys on the Discord, I think maybe Matt doesn't run a sling either. And if you were to give me the choice, like I gave you the choice between a 3 point and no sling, I'm not necessarily sure I would pick the 3 point, because a lot of the things that we do that I value at the very least on the field, like being able to transition very quickly and stuff, is not necessarily hampered by not having a sling. Although I will say that now that I'm exclusively on HPA, not having a sling is a bit of a problem, because it makes it a little bit slower if I want to like dump my rifle and like leave it somewhere. It's kind of hard to just sort of leave it
Yeah,
lying
you're
around,
you're
right?
adding a step,
Yeah.
at a minimum. Yeah, I mean, like to talking about Cal, like I genuinely will add, for one, I think he's a lot more willing to like be rough and ready with his airsoft kit than I am.
Yeah, for sure.
And like he hasn't broken it doing that, so that's just my
Yeah,
relative
that's
parent.
true.
That's
Also
like that's
true.
my
Yeah.
relative sliding scale of paranoia. I think that has more
Mhm.
to do with my madness than his. But also, like, and I'm gonna say this of you as well, like, neither you nor crew has a knee that dislocates itself periodically just to fuck with you.
Yeah.
Language, just to mess with you.
That's yeah.
And like that's resolved really. Like, I've got that sorted out. But years of worrying about it have left me with just sort of an approach of worrying about it,
For sure.
right?
I think
And
that's a
like, I'm not graceful.
fair. Well, and I think that's something that people need to take into consideration. Like if you are like you are prone to falling over randomly for the last several years, or if you're someone who knows that you are clumsy, why would you not take additional steps to protect your kit, right? I think that's a fair way of thinking about it. And we've talked slings to death, and if you've listened to our content before, first, if this is your first time listening to our content, there's really other things you probably should listen to first, but I digress. You've listened to our content before, you know how much we value slings in general, let alone 2 point slings. If you don't have one by now, you probably have your own use case,
Yeah,
right? You're probably like, no, I'm actively choosing not to use one, and I have my reasons for not doing that, and that's totally cool, right? But I think why this question is so tough, I think, is because of that value that we place on them. And the fact that I'm prepared to not use one instead of using a 3 point, I think should tell you a lot about how garbage I think they are. Now, in the 3 points defense, which I also I don't want to jump too hastily to, but it's been many years since I've used one, and I think I am more in tune with like my ready ups and stuff like that than I was at when I was using one a bit more seriously. You're talking about a decade in the difference.
totally.
So,
I'm also really willing to
maybe
say,
it's
though,
different.
like very explicitly and very bluntly, that one of my first thoughts in terms of like, not would I do this, but like, how would I manage it after I go, okay, like, yes, I'd rather have the sling, is like, I have paracord and like ripper tape in my bag, and I may just turn it into a crummy 2-point. Like,
Yeah.
let's be clear here. You know, I'm not convinced that like I'm taking the 3-point because of any of the features. I might be taking it because it is additionally long. Like if option 3 is a piece of rope that I can tie into my sling points, sure.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah,
So,
it'll
all right.
do.
Well, I mean, so now that we're modifying the question or whatever, perhaps it's time to move on
Yeah,
to another one.
You know.
So here's another sort of another challenging one, I think, and prompted by a lot of conversation that I've been having on Discord. But would you rather have to ditch your so situation is you have to ditch your chest rig, right? And your two options are you go back to a plate carrier, or you go strictly to a belt kit, right? And for the purposes of this belt kit, I will allow you some sort of like harness that goes on your shoulders to support your belt, but all of your kit is on your belt line.
Okay, so I have to ask for clarification there. So does that mean I'm migrating my tank for my HPA to the belt as well?
All of it.
Oh, because like I've done that and I really don't like it. Like I found that super uncomfortable. I think if I were going to do that, I'd probably go look for some kind of chest rig that I could buy, that or some kind of like plate carrier, I guess, that I can buy. That I'm sort of spitballing here because I haven't looked at this stuff in a really long time. But like, if a plate carrier exists that I can put the mags and stuff that I carry on, and like put a hydration pack or something to carry my my air bottle on, I guess probably that. But like, the answer for me is going to be like, what kind of minimalist plate carrier can I find that is made not in like a secondhand place in China that actually makes stuff in sizes for American, European, whatever, large people. Because like the biggest issue I had with the 1694 was not that the 1694 was like uncomfortable or bad as a design. Like I think it's a fine design of kit. Like I moved away from it partly because the one I was wearing was sized for you.
Yeah, for right? Sure. Like 100%.
And like, I mean, people who are long time, listeners or viewers who've looked at our content before, like you can go back and look at the pictures of me. Like even Skinny Pat was like, yeah, I'm not sure that this chest plate would be protecting my organs. Like it's protecting some of them, but and fundamentally what that meant was that like every time I was wearing that, it was cutting into my shoulders and my neck, and it just was super uncomfortable. But like for the long range play, I don't think there'd be anything wrong with the belt kit if I had somewhere else to put the HPA. Like if I can keep the backpack for the HPA, like a belt kit is fine. Like I've got a Molly belt. It can carry 4 or 5 mags. There aren't a lot of games where we play at frontline that I end up using more than 5 in like a game. I still prefer to carry the 7 or 8 that I carry on my vest, just because we do play a couple of longer game modes where it's like I need more ammo, helpful, and because I can be a slacker and be like, I don't need to reload in between games. I've got 4 or 5 mags left, whatever. But if I'm trying to build a like kit that I think will work efficiently with the HPA tank and comfortably with the HPA tank, then I'm probably going to go with the plate carrier, simply because it gives me more ways to store that. And I hated having it on my belt. Like, I was like, not because I was afraid that like it was going to get shot, but because I was afraid I was going to just like smack the regulator off of something and just tear it off.
I think that's a fair concern. Absolutely. I do, although I will say on the Discord, several people, like Matt, for example, only runs belt kit. Like that's it. And he runs his tank on the belt, but he uses a much smaller tank than we do. Right. And so I think there's a world here with this particular sort of criteria where maybe the tanks that we're using are too big. And like we use those tanks for convenience because that way we never have to, gas up in between games typically, right? Because if you have, 68 cubic inch tank, there's no way that you're going to run through that in like 3 hours of play. I mean, unless you're running the LMG and all you're doing is shooting constantly, then yeah, maybe. But on a Kythera,
Oh yeah,
like I realistically could get away with a much smaller tank and just maybe I have to reload, the tank. I mean, reload the tank, every hour or something like that, and that would be okay.
and like there's
Yeah,
a 100% argument for that. I mean, Cal runs a much smaller tank than we do with zero issues, right? He just refills it every couple of games.
Yeah, and he runs a gun as well with an engine in it. Well, he's running the Tipman, right?
Yeah.
Which uses a lot more gas.
It's
than
hugely less
Kythera
efficient than either of what we're running.
F2, yeah.
Yeah, no, or the fusion engine. Like,
yeah, and so I think when I was thinking about this, like I know I've seen on the Discord and I've seen talked to Jordan and stuff. Like, there's definitely a switch in many players' sort of view around like macro kits, right? Instead of going for that micro, like we've done, or I've done at least, it's about putting not necessarily as much kit on purpose, but like making sure that your rig has as much stuff as you're going to need. And, if that means 10 mags or it means 2 LMG box mags or whatever, like they're doing that. And I definitely see the appeal in that context of having that belt kit because especially when you have like a shoulder harness system, it allows you to distribute that weight just fine.
For sure. And like the minimalist kit thing, or, I mean, like, you look at what John's been running when he's not trying to maximize and just like carry every single thing, for years, just the belt with a couple of mags. I think it works fine. I think it's a very effective, efficient kind of kit. I think some of this may also like loop back to playstyle.
That's true.
John just is a faster guy than I am, and the lighter kit helps him in that respect. Like I'd probably, if I tossed back on a Cyraz, right? Like if I went and got my original plate carrier and tossed it on, I'm sure it would slow me down because it weighs like 20 pounds. But and I suspect this is the case, there's something in between those two things that's like, oh yeah, this is, a reasonable plate carrier. Like honestly, something like if I could just get a 6094, like that fit me, sure. Right, that's not a problem.
I'd actually love to see you go back to your Cyraz for like a day or like like give it the old college try. John has been tempting me with that good time as well with mine because I don't have mine, but I have maybe Evan's old one. I don't know, somewhere up in the studio. And he's like, you should wear that for a game, and I'm like, I would rather die, but also I'm kind of curious. Like I would just like to see it. I know my plate carrier is like, I used it for so many years. I don't even need to think about.
I could reach out to the guy who has it, I guess. Like I still know where it is, but I feel like the hassle is probably like, if I'm gonna do it, we need to like have a spare GoPro strap onto me so that people could just listen to me bitch for the entire day.
It would have to be for the art. There's no question,
right?
Because, and to be honest, the one that's up there is big enough. I'm pretty sure it'd fit you as well.
Oh yeah,
but it's like when I wore the World War II kit that John had. Its expectations are zero. Like, and this is gonna. I don't even know how to reload a Thompson. Like, I had no idea where the mag catch is, and he did not tell me. Let's go. Right. So it would be sort of that similar situation for sure.
My view is really like, I mean, I'd do it. Like if you want to toss some mag pouches on the one that's there, and we can see if we can size it to fit me. I'll run that for a game for the laughs, and we can take video of it and come back and do an episode about why I hated it.
Imagine though, a world where you're like, I actually didn't hate it.
I mean, that would be fun.
Right?
And like, and there are definitely perks to it. Like there were things I liked about the Cyraz. Most of those things were really just like the fact that I could use it, like that I had so much real estate that it was just like, I've got everything. Like I'm literally doing the hermit crab thing. My entire house is on my back. Like, and I don't think that was efficient for what we were doing, and I don't think it's efficient for what we're doing now. But like, if I were playing all day milsim games where I really needed to be humping a lot of gear, because that was the design intent of the scenario, I could see the value.
Yeah.
At this point, I think I'd probably just bring like a day pack instead, but I can see the value.
To be honest, if we were doing like an all day self supported milsim sort of situation, I'm not sure I wouldn't actually go for a belt kit instead. Excuse me, and build it the way that the guys have been showing. Where because I've been sort of belt kit curious in the last little while, sort of in my thinking about how to set up my own kit, and the way that they have it set up, firstly, is very comfortable. Like the look, not the look, excuse me, but the setup that they have with the load bearing equipment on their shoulders, really good. Like the weight distribution is excellent, which means you can carry a lot of kit and not feel like you're hunching your back forward or what
Totally. I mean,
have
like
you.
I've run
Right.
my
So.
I haven't run a pile of stuff on it, to be clear, but the Molly belt over tack belt that I have, I've run that with the suspenders that you and I both have. I'm like, it's
Mhm.
super comfortable. And it could definitely take, I mean, I've had it, with my sidearm and like a mag pouch, or not a mag pouch, a dump pouch that's completely full of mags on it and a few other
Mhm.
things. And like, that was fine. So I can definitely see it being comfortable. And like when you posed the question, I definitely wasn't thinking, oh, I could go buy a smaller tank. But yeah, I definitely could go buy a smaller tank. I could go, adjust the way I'm carrying my air and run it. And I think it'd be fine. I'm not motivated to do it because I really like my chest rig. Um, like it literally has given me zero problems. I have no complaints about it. But I can
Mhm.
definitely see the thought process you're going through there. Part of it also
Yeah.
is like, again, to loop back to what I was saying with John, like you're a smaller, quicker guy. Like, I I have questions about how much the plate carrier is really going to impede me by being big and heavy.
That's true. Yeah.
Like, do I need to toss it on while I do some cardio? Probably. Could I stand to do that with the chest rig too? Yeah.
Maybe
Like
just skip the chest rig or the plate carrier, just do the
do the
cardio.
cardio.
Maybe
Yeah,
I don't know.
exactly. Right. Like, but I think I feel pretty positive about like the idea of using a belt kit if I could get this stuff squared away. And I mean, realistically, like one of the things that's pretty obvious here is that you've talked to people who are doing it and thought about, oh yeah, how would I do that? And I really haven't.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
And the first
I'm
thing I would,
throwing you onto the bus, right?
well, no, but
Like,
like, but the first thing I would do is literally go, hey, Discord, who runs belt kits? Show me.
yeah,
Right. Like,
yeah,
hey
exactly
guys, what do
right.
you do? And especially, like who here runs a belt kit in HPA? How have you got that set up? Right. Because they've got experience with it and have tested it. Great. Perfect. Give it to me. Show me how to do it. Right. And like, again, I definitely carry more mags than I need most of the time. Right.
That for what we do for sure.
And like,
Yeah,
especially,
no
I think if
question.
I were going to switch to that kit, I would take advantage of one of the things my gun can do, and I would up the FPS to a like actual DMR limit for where we play, zero it in, lock it out at single, and like semi, and just go, okay, this playstyle doesn't need as much ammunition. Carry on.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. I have the option to do the luxury of doing that. And like the LMG, fine, I'll run a build kit. What's going to be on it? An air tank. Cool.
Yeah, and like maybe a spare box bag. Who
Yeah,
knows?
a
Right?
spare box mag.
Yeah.
If once I buy one, like, cool, no problem.
Yeah.
This is easy.
All right. So I've got another question. Another question lined up now. With a bit more serious this time. Let's assume that Bill C-21 had happened and included airsoft, and basically airsoft became unplayable. Right? Would you prefer to switch over to paintball, or just basically abandon the action sport hobby part of your life?
So I'll be honest with you. I think there's a third option that I feel is much more likely to have been the outcome. So my expectation really is that what I would be doing, assuming that this weren't covered in the law, and I don't think they'd be able to adjust the law quickly enough to keep up with it, which yes does put me sort of in like maybe a malicious compliance kind of situation here, but like is I would be doing what the lovely folks who 6mm Mando plays with are doing, and I'd just be like, all right, well, you say it can't look like a real gun, can it look like a lasgun from 40K? Can it look like a bolter? Like, how many
Mhm.
parts do I have to 3D print to put onto this before it's not an airsoft gun the way you guys have just made it legislatively illegal to use? Because that's what I'm going to do. Peace.
Yeah.
You know, like, and I'm more comfortable with that than, you know, you might think. Um, if the choice is strictly airsoft doesn't exist anymore, would you stop playing action sports or would you go start playing paintball? My answer is I don't know, because I haven't played enough paintball in like 20 years to have an impression of it.
Mhm.
And because honestly, when last I was interested in playing paintball, like, you were playing paintball, and
Yeah.
I surmise that the equipment that is used to play it has probably changed sometime since we were in high school.
Yeah.
You know, so like I know, just as an example from like chatting with some of the local guys who have come over from paintball or who do both, you know, like the mag-fed paintball guns seem cool. Like, that doesn't seem terrible. This also gets a lot easier because I am on HPA right now, so like I don't have the tank and rig buy-in. Like, I can just buy a gun, I guess. A marker, sorry.
Yeah.
Um, I'd be lying to you if I said that like it's as appealing as the first thing. Like, I would much rather go just, you know, convert my airsoft rifles to look
Yeah.
like some sort of
Well, to be
cool space
honest,
gun and carry on.
I think, and it's funny that you bring that up because I never really considered that when I was creating the question. I know some people had talked about it during some of the C21 days and talked about, oh, well, what if we make our, our Plasto blasters look like Nerf guns or whatever else, which is fair. I just, to think about that situation logically, like, yeah, you would have done that because, like, who doesn't love a las gun, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
right.
I
Or,
don't think the Imperial Guardsmen particularly care about their las guns, but that's the
you know,
point. Um, like, but I think the reality is, I don't think you would have seen a mass transformation towards that. Like, if you look at our community right now who play airsoft, the 40, 50 guys in our community, how many of them actually would have bothered to go through? It would have taken some time and you probably wouldn't have gotten that whole conversion, right? So
I
in
mean,
my mind, I was thinking, like, even if that happens, it's probably not going to be like it was.
I'm actually more optimistic than you are, um, about that. I think that if you looked at, um, you know, the local community or just the Canadian, really, airsoft
Mm-hmm.
community, so you look at how much money there is in Canadian airsoft, I think there's absolutely a market there for, um, or a sufficient, that there would be a market there for people to go, all right, we're going to, you know, approach the manufacturers and be like, okay, this is what's illegal. What can we do? Right.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, and I think that if you look at, you know, most of the Star Wars movies used, real world stuff with tons of pieces stapled on as the basis for their guns. So like, yeah,
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of room there for just, yeah, we're gonna make other stuff that works. I think it might have taken a couple of years. You know, but I also know how quickly some of the people who I know can uh can throw together something in CAD to be 3D printed and 3D printed, right? Like, you know, hey Pat, do you want a bolter to go around your M27? Sure, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and like I don't think that's an ideal solution. I'm way happier with the current outcome.
Yes, no
But
question.
like
Yeah.
I would personally be a lot more likely to look into that and try to promote that here than I would be to go, hey, let's go play paintball. And I mean, part of that honestly is that, I've always thought that paint for paintball seemed like hideously expensive, and I've always been like, man,
Yeah.
how? And that's not a criticism to any of the paintball folks out there. It's just a like, that's real money, you know.
Yeah.
But
Definitely.
yeah, and like I haven't played enough paintball to be able to go like, oh yeah, sure. I also do other combat sport stuff, so like,
Yeah.
you know, there's also, if I'm being honest, a real world where they're like, well, you can't do this anymore, and I'm like, well, I guess maybe I will just have to think about putting the time, the same, like the time that I dedicate to airsoft stuff into HEMA, into, you know, some sort of other like analogous thing that I'm still allowed to do.
Yeah.
You know, I
That's where I was landing with all of that. Like, not that we were ever doom and gloom about it, but it could have been a possibility, right?
totally.
And I think if you gave me the scenario between, okay, listen, now you have to play paintball. That's the only form of like action sport hobby that you can get. I'm not sure I would have done that, right? For a variety of different reasons, not least of which, like you just pointed out, that paintball is very expensive to play. And like if I went into paintball, I would want to be using first strike rounds. I would want to be using a mag fed paintball marker,
Yeah,
right?
and I
Like,
think
yeah,
and
we
I
have
think
the
you and I
HP
have
tank, and like,
like we agree on this, but I think and I think we both just described the most expensive way to play paintball. Like,
yeah. And
not
so,
sure, but I have my suspicions.
yeah, and I really, to be honest, like for me, the appeal from airsoft in terms of like replica manipulation and all this kind of stuff, like the way that we play and the ranges. I mean, airsoft ranges aren't amazing, but it's night and day compared to paintball, right? And so fundamentally, it's a different game altogether. And I know some people really, really like it. I know Jeremy on our team loves, paintball. He loves what they call MPP, mag pump pistol paintball games. They have a great community and stuff. I just, having played a fair amount of it 20 years ago, admittedly, it's not really. I don't really think that that's something I would want to go back towards. And um, being an adult, like you described, like there's a lot of different hobbies, a lot of different things that compete for our attention,
Yeah,
right? Not least of which our jobs are, in my case, my spouse, my house, my chickens, like everything that require a fair amount of time. Like
Uh,
it's not that airsoft consumes that much time, although in my case, like there's a lot of airsoft adjacent stuff like this, like content creation, whatnot. Not necessarily sure that I would be wanting to reinvest that time into
I,
into paintball for me.
I think one of the things also that would run off for both of us is going, well, you know, having our kit burned in the sense of like, right now, if I want to change a piece of my kit out, like if I want to change any of my airsoft replicas out for a different replica, it's very easy for me to just convert them without taking any money out of the sport or putting a whole lot more in.
Yeah,
As long as I'm like, I can sell the LMG and then buy an LMG and a HPA unit to go in the LMG, etc. Right? If all of my replicas suddenly become these can't ever leave the house other than to be destroyed, then it sort of also becomes a, well, do I want to invest in paintball? If they did this to airsoft, are they going to do this to paintball? Do I have, however much a mag fed marker for strike rounds and mags cost? And like, um, I like at a bare minimum, I'd be like, I think I'm gonna go like bum some gear from Jeremy and his friends and try this. Because like also, I think paintball feels a lot closer to like door kicker CQB. That's what it is in my head. I'm like, I don't play paintball again, like far longer even than Phil. So what do I know? But like I'm not playing at the CQB field.
yeah,
Right? Like that's not my favorite mode of play. So for them to go, okay, you can't play airsoft. Do you want to play paintball? The answer is I definitely have to try it first.
yeah. I think that's a fair way of looking at it. But it comes down, the big thing I just think about. It's like, do I have a car payment's worth of paint available to buy every month? Because fundamentally, like if I want to shoot
Yeah, yikes.
1,000 paintballs, right?
Yeah,
Like
that's
a case
contextually
of
brutal.
paint is like $100 and something, $150 or something for a case of decent paint, and that's just paint. That's not first strike rounds, right? Like if I want to shoot 1,000 first strike rounds, it's like $250 or something. Like that's expensive.
Yeah,
So
so it's going to
yeah,
become
it's like 25 cents a shot or something.
at
So
that point
like
it's also
yeah,
going to just straight up become a thing that it's like, well, we can't do this every week, right? Like
yeah,
we're
exactly.
not
Yeah,
doing this every week.
not
I
that we really do, but in the summer
I mean,
maybe.
fair, but like in the summer we try to go like once or twice.
Yeah,
We try to go twice a month, 2 or 3 times more if we can manage. Um, like to be honest with you, um, a third alternative that I think might have just been a viable thing for our interests and like relatable is just like, do you want to just go buy a 22 and get a range permit because that's cheaper than the paintball, and it probably is actually a little closer to what we like would enjoy.
Yeah, but we can't shoot each other with 22, so
There is that. Well, I mean, you can shoot me
you know,
once.
maybe we get laser guns instead.
Yeah, I mean, like go buy laser tag.
Yeah, exactly.
But like also, yeah, you know, I'll get two. We can 3D print two bolters to wrap around the guns. It'll be fine, right? Like, yeah, I didn't spend too long thinking about what we were going to do if C21 like passed as was, because I didn't feel like there were a lot of good outs, and I didn't want to dwell on it.
Yeah, and that's fair, I think. And to be honest, nor did I. I think I spent more time convincing other people to write government and stuff, and we don't need to rehash it. But
I mean,
I
that's
think
a more
the
productive
energy
use of
was
your
well
time.
spent.
Like,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
So speaking of productive use of our time, let me ask you a fun question then. Would you rather have a replica that aesthetically is everything you want, but it underperforms, or a replica that looks stupid as hell, whatever that means to you, but is an absolute nail driver?
Oh, that's tough. Because like, I love the Garand, and it definitely underperforms relative to the M27. But I love the Garand because
Okay,
look
but
at it.
Yeah, but your M27 aesthetically also is baller.
Oh yeah,
and it's a nail driver.
There's that
so,
too,
like,
right? Yeah, like that doesn't even, I guess, qualify. Yeah, I mean, like the problem there is that we're like getting into like spray painting it blaze orange and like hazard blue to make it look bad enough that I'm not willing to run the M27. Like there aren't a lot of actual guns that it could be a replica of that I'm like, this is so dumb I won't touch it.
and like, how bad would it have to be for you to look at M27 knowing that it's a nail driver and go, no, I'm not using that?
I mean, I'll be honest with you, like you probably could spray paint it blaze orange, like hunter orange, and I'd be like, whatever.
Yeah.
Like,
yes.
like Pat, people are going to be able to see you. Yeah, but I'm going to be able to reach them, and they're not going to be able to reach me. The hell with it, right? Like,
yeah.
So, yeah, I think I probably do come down on the side of like I'd rather have a really good rifle or replica rather that like does everything I want it to and works all the time, than something that's like inconsistent and meh, but looks baller.
I knew the answer to this question because I think we've talked about this a lot. Like, we value performance basically over everything, and there's like, if the replica was everything that I wanted to, but it underperformed, I would just want to bend it over my knee after a game when I'm like, like I would get so frustrated with it. Like, you've seen me be frustrated with my kit when it's not working.
The question really, like, for you especially, actually boils down to like, would you rather have a really cool wall hanger that you look at and think is awesome and never play, or have your primary be like shitty looking?
Yeah.
Because you're not going to enjoy playing with a replica that shoots badly.
Exactly.
We have tested it, especially, and like you specifically were like, not badly, inconsistently, right? Like, because I mean, we both know this. Like, it's actually easier to work with a gun that is performing consistently meh than a gun that's sometimes brilliant and sometimes not.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
You know, like if it's okay all of the time, sure, fine, right? Like, you know, in the sense that like I would rather run a like go buy a Raider and run it for a season than run a gun that was sometimes shooting perfectly and other times shooting terribly.
Yeah, because if you know that realistically your effective range is 100 feet all of the time, but within that 100 feet you can put a BB on target, you know, 1 or 2 BBs on target when the first couple of shots consistently, you can work with that.
Yeah, totally.
But if you don't know, is this going to shoot or is this not going to shoot, or is it going to fly off, or is it going to go straight, or am I in range or not? Like, it makes it very challenging. And that, I find, is, we've talked about this, is so frustrating. The other thing too, I would say, is while you're using it, you can't see how cool or uncool your gun looks like, really.
Yeah. No,
right? Like, I don't know about you, but when I play airsoft, I don't spend a lot of time looking at my replica. I am looking everywhere, well, through my sight, surely, but, you know, everywhere else. Like, I'm not looking, being like, man, what a sweet paint job. I'm like, no, that guy's over there and I got to shoot him. Pat, you do this. Like,
totally. I'm like,
right?
I want my, you know, like, I mean, in terms of, you know, like bottom line, actually, in terms of the replica, like, looking cool versus like efficacy. One of the things I'm doing between now and the next season is painting my gun camo.
Mhm.
I think it looks cooler as is. I think airsoft guns and real steel guns look cool when they're black and just like that,
Right. Well, that's our
industrial.
show, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. We'll talk to you next week.
His problem.
Well, I mean, I think I have a very strong opinion about black painted, excuse me, guns that are unpainted and left black. So, I mean,
Yeah,
that was a joke that I was
I mean,
making.
fair enough, but like it's an aesthetic thing. I think aesthetically, I think
Mhm.
they look cool in a like bad guy-y, industrially kind of way, or slick James Bond kind of way, whatever, right? Um, do I know that painted guns, practically speaking, give you a genuine, real advantage in airsoft? Yes, absolutely. I've experienced
Yeah,
it.
or at the very least, zero drawback.
Yeah, for sure.
Right?
Like they're
Like you play a CQB game, yeah, paint job, whatever.
yeah,
Right?
like they're neutral in some situations and beneficial in others. Sure, right?
Yeah.
Like, but yeah, I mean, one of the things we've talked a bit about is just that I'm going to try to run the M27 more next season, and really, if I'm going to run it, I should be leaning into I've bought .36 BBs, I've bought heavier weight ammunition. I'm going to lean into just like the fact that it can shoot forever, and if I'm going to do that, then yeah, painting the gun is kind of a no-brainer, even though genuinely it's a little hard for me to do.
You'll
Silly,
get
right?
over it.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. It's just funny.
Now we just need to get you all gillied up, and then what that first game where you're concealed, you're in like a bush, you've got perfect concealment because of the camo that you're wearing, and your gun is painted, and then someone looks at you directly and doesn't see you, and then you like drive a BB into their forehead or whatever. You'll be like, yeah, totally worth it. Like I know that's going
I
to
mean,
be just a perfect
I
moment
mean,
for
like I'm
you.
absolutely willing to like trim my hat or whatever. Like I look enough like a Wookiee. We do not need to go full ghillie suit.
Yes,
Just
that's fair.
as much fun as you getting to say get this walking carpet out of my way will be.
Yeah.
But yeah, like um, I think it's a real thing where like I need to. I mean, I've already started. I spray painted my backpack earlier this season, or at the end of that, towards the end of last season rather. And just the fact that I did that is going to be, or has already been, useful. So
Yeah,
I
definitely.
feel
I
like
100%
doing the
agree.
same thing. I might, I want to pick up a second line anyway, just as a, like, having a spare. And I'm probably going to buy it from, well, I'll either buy it from Andy's, in which case it'll be black, or if I buy it from Amped, I might just get a, like, tan one, like, or a green one, like a camoed one, because they do sell
Yeah, it
camo
was
ones,
painted.
Yeah, that's also probably true. Not a thing I thought about, but like I can't see any. As long as you cover up the connectors, I don't see any reason that
Yeah,
you wouldn't.
just tape up the connectors
Yeah,
and just hit it with paint.
touche.
Yeah, I wouldn't
Yeah, touche.
worry about that.
So
So yeah, I think it's a good idea, and we've sort of drifted off the like stupid looking guns, but we've talked about it a lot
I think
before.
people
But
are okay if we're occasionally talking about something useful.
yeah,
Like,
yeah, I think
let us know if we're not.
camouflage. Yeah, camouflage is so critical, and there's small changes make a big difference. Like I think you just constructively, I think some of the camo that you wore last year, like there's like this like a smock Denison smock top that you wear.
Yeah, the U.S.
Um,
Woodland one.
yeah, no, not that one. There's another one that's more like brown that you've worn before. I don't know
Oh
if
yeah,
it's a smock or an
yeah,
anorak or
the
whatever.
para.
Like, yeah,
Yep.
that's not great camo, right?
Yeah, I mean, to be
Point
honest,
blank.
with you, most of the reason I wear it is that it's super freaking comfy.
Yeah, for sure. And so, there's absolutely a part there where it's like, okay, well, am I wearing the right camo for my environment? And I think once you get that dialed in for yourself, and then toss on a boonie with scrim and stuff, you'll be able to really utilize parts of the field that are further away. You're also going to be concealed. I think it's going to be really excellent for you this season. Obviously, not all games, like playing a village game or even on the road, maybe a little bit dicey. But any game where we're like in the woods, in like Black Hawk to like Big Fort,
Yep.
for you, the guys who are local who are listening to this, that means something to you. But those have a lot of opportunity for you to maximize your concealment. which is not, in my opinion, based on our experience playing together, it's not something that you as a bigger guy have done a whole lot of.
Yeah, no,
right?
it's going to be skill building for me, right? Like, and I've talked to Cal about it also in a like, how do I improve my cover utilization here? Like, what can I do about this? And
Mhm.
if the answer is like partly be less lazy, like just you know,
Definitely.
um, but also yeah, like
I would
um,
say be more mindful. That's, I think, a kinder way
I mean,
of
yeah, totally. Like,
putting
I
it.
think possibly both. Like, but um, it's weird to say this, but I feel like some of it is bad habits from Redcliffe, even though Redcliffe was ages ago, because I haven't addressed this as an aspect of my play, right? Like Redcliffe, you're either in cover or you weren't. Like the cover was either really, really good or it didn't exist.
Yeah.
And I got super comfortable with like walking under my own fire to move around, right? Or running while shooting to move around. And I just don't think I've done a good job of like thinking out or feeling out how to do this stuff at the field we've been playing at over the last 5 years, and that's
Hmm.
definitely on me. Um, but yeah, no, um, I'm my airsoft budget for the coming season, like we talked about, is like I've been looking at like a lower profile, like an Oakley M frame or something with a seal, and I do
Hmm.
think that's a really good idea, so I'm going to do it. But a lot of the rest of it really boils down to like concealment stuff, right? So, um, like I'm going to give the M27 hoodie a try just because it's a significantly different camo and see how it works. I'm probably going to pick up a couple of more, like not necessarily hoodies, but like a couple of more pieces of just like options for camo based on time of year and stuff, and try to actually dial what I'm wearing in a bit more. Like the trousers I'm wearing are OD and they seem to work fine, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah. I wouldn't
I
worry
don't
about
think there's
that.
any
Yeah.
issue there, but yeah, I need to put a little more care into what I'm wearing on the top of me. Put a little more thought into what I'm wearing in terms of like boonies, hats, whatever, for concealment purposes as well. Maybe take a look at what I'm using for my ear pro hearing stuff and like figure out if there's a way to shrink those so they fit under a hat instead of over it, stuff like that.
Hmm.
But yeah, no, it is on the mind. It is things I want to try for this season. Because really, like, you know, I don't need to go buy another gun.
Definitely.
I mean, I still need to still need to sell one of them. But the airsoft budget probably doesn't need more airsoft guns in it. But I genuinely have been, and won't even really say I regret this. Like, but I've definitely made an active choice the last 2 seasons to put a lot of money into the M27 and then the 249. So they're good. They're doing the thing. That's great. But I haven't thought about my camo in a while. I haven't thought about how I'm camouflaging or why or like effectiveness there. I think partly
Yeah.
because, as you noted, like it's not that useful when we're playing village games. And I'm like, yeah, so like I don't care. Has been kind of the thought process, and I don't think that's smart of me.
Yeah. But I mean, one crisis at a time, too. But I think what you're talking about now actually leads in perfectly to the last question that I had for us today, which is, would you prefer to be completely confident in your airsoft skills with no ability to critically evaluate your performance, right? I am the airsoft god. Or constantly suffer from lack of confidence and never be able to feel like you're good at airsoft?
I mean, um, not to put too fine a point on, but like which one of these I am already.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Good.
um,
Because I'm glad, because this, when I wrote this, I was like, you know what? I think I'm the latter as well.
like
So
you
yeah.
know like ask the person with depression issues whether or not they have experienced feeling like they're never good at anything. You know I'm aware, just so that like people are clear here, like I'm aware that I'm a pretty good airsoft player, but like I often don't feel like I'm at all a good airsoft player.
Hmm.
And like I mean, maybe that's useful for people, right? Like whether you're old or new, you're gonna have games you're just like, well, I am terrible at this. you know
Yeah.
I sometimes I go out and it's like, sometimes it's late in the season and I'm like, oh yeah, like I'm practiced up, I'm feeling myself, things are going well, and I'm just like, Well, I have been shot in the face 17 times today, all of those times within the first 30 seconds of the game starting, and most of them by our team. You know, hey, Steph,
Yeah.
stop shooting me in the nose, etc. Right? Like, I know it's big. It's a
It's
big target. I
funny.
get it. But, like, really.
Yeah, well, it's not that big,
But yeah,
right?
no, like,
Cyrano or whatever.
but like the critical thought piece is really valuable. I'd much
Yeah.
rather at anything, like being at least a little bit introspective, being a person who is self-critical and who thinks about what they're doing and whether or not they're doing things right is always the right play. Um, and like there's some irony in sitting here talking to you and going, yeah, like I haven't really thought about my camo in a few years, and going, well, we talk about how you need to reevaluate your kit, but like, really until this season, you also weren't looking at me being like, man, you really need to rethink your camo stuff. And I don't think that's like a fault in either of our approach. It's just a like, oh yeah, sling's good, boots good, you know. And then we do stuff where you and John play around with camo. Like we've done videos where you guys talk about it. And I was like, oh man, like I should do something to like make sure my stuff is good. And then, to be honest with you, more exciting things such as HPAing my M27 wandered by, and I was like,
Yeah, 100%.
you know,
There's only certain amount of things that you can actually critically look at any given time and actually improve on.
totally.
Right? I think, whether it's your camo, whether it's just like we could rattle off a list of things that, we need to improve on. The reality is we can only realistically work on like actually focused work on like one at a time, let's say, right? I think what's really interesting, and the reason that I wrote this question is because, like I was saying, we're jokingly like, we definitely, or I definitely feel, and I think many of us who play airsoft are, fall into this trap of like, why do I suck at airsoft? Right? It's a constant question that comes up. We see it on the Discord, people talking about it all the time.
I mean,
And
people
fundamentally,
use
like,
it as a clickbaity title on their YouTube stuff, right? Like,
yes, and spoiler alert, we might be doing just that.
well,
But
fair
beside
enough.
the point, I think when it comes to your airsoft skill, like I think if you're the kind of person who thinks like you're the best, you're hot shit, you don't make any mistakes, everything is dialed in, chances are you are probably either very, very new and you don't know how much you don't know, or you're just completely oblivious to everything else that's going around you, which is possible. Because
may I
I
introduce you
feel
to
like
the
as
idea of
soon,
hubris?
well, it's only hubris if they're wrong. P.S.
I'm wrong
I
all the
think
time.
I think the challenge though is that when you do take an approach where you start to critically evaluate and you try to educate yourself, you naturally fall into this like, oh my god, I don't know anything about anything, right? The magnitude of all the learning that's in front of you, is just laid bare in front of you, and you're like, oh my god, I don't know anything, and then you start to feel that way where it's like, oh, I can't possibly be good,
Like, I mean,
right?
to step aside from like airsoft specifically for a second, like I paint toy soldiers. When I paint something and I look at it, I'm like, oh, it's right. And then my friends are like,
Yeah.
but it looks really good. And I'm like, but it's not these people who do this for like 60 hours a week and get paid a lot of money to do it good. And it's like, yeah, but you aren't those people. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
The really, I think actually just a useful thing to have in your brain is, and I've probably said this at some point in an episode before, but the biggest hurdle to teaching, especially adults, as an like in art class, is that everyone shows up and they draw and they're like, okay, so it's better than a stickman, like a stickman, but it's not like Da Vinci's drawings of the human body. Therefore, it's absolute garbage, and I have no ability to do anything with this. And you're like,
Mhm.
okay, but the person you're using as your comparison point was taught by literal masters from the age of like 6, and certainly racks up in one of the like 10 best people in human history at drawing. Maybe that's not a fair comparison. So it's if you're going, well, I'm the best at this, you're probably wrong. But
Yeah.
if you're going, and like, don't get me wrong, like both of us do it. I know because I've talked to Phil after days where he's like, oh my god, I'm useless at this. What the hell?
Yeah, I can't do anything right.
And like
Yeah.
he's talked to me in the same circumstances. All right, fair enough. But, you know, that's both of our job there is talk one another down. That's not reality. Reality is, oh yeah, you had an off day, right?
Yeah.
And also, like, there are situations, it doesn't matter how good you are. There's 8 people on the other team, and all of them are holding down auto. BB has hit you.
Yeah. It's like
Oh,
Captain
well.
Picard said, like, it is possible to make no mistakes and still lose, right? That doesn't mean you're bad. That's how things happen.
It's reality.
I think, yeah, and you know, coming back to it, I think, you know, the question of like constantly suffering from lack of confidence. Like, yeah, if you're going out to the field and you're like you're getting disappointment after disappointment after disappointment after disappointment. Firstly, why are you still doing this? But also on the flip side of that, like, how constructively are you looking at the situations that you find yourself in to give yourself the opportunity to get better?
Yeah, like, you don't want
right? Because if
to go play and
yeah,
just
like,
beat yourself up all day, every
yes,
day, right?
totally. Like, I mean, if you're dealing with like a mental health issue where you suffer from lack of self-worth in a general context, that's not really what we're talking about here. That's
Totally.
you know, there are people who can help you with that, and you should avail of them. But for our context, like, if you feel like you constantly not being good, you have to come up with at least a plan to get you out of that. Either that is, well, I don't think I really want to keep doing this anymore because I'm not enjoying it, which is 100% legit. That can happen to anybody at any time. You could do this for 10 years, and on the 11th year, you're like, you know what? I don't think I enjoy this anymore. That happens, right? But if that's not you, then it has to be the other thing, which is like, okay, how am I going to improve? And what are the metrics that I'm going to look towards to say whether or not I'm actually getting there?
There's a
right?
distinction between reflective practice in anything, which is very useful and very helpful, and being hypercritical of yourself.
And just browbeating yourself for
like,
no reason.
We are both here having tested and tried the latter option to tell you that being reflective is much better.
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
Like, we've done the testing. My favorite thing to say to students is learn from my stupidity. There you go, right? Like, this is a dumb thing I've done. Don't do it.
And on the flip side of that, I think it is possible for you to be confident in your abilities and still recognize your own limitations and be like, I'm confident in my abilities, but I am not going to emerge victorious in this situation.
Totally.
That's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just a statement of fact, right? Or at least your perception.
I have lots of days of airsoft where I feel that I'm a good, competent player, and also where I'm like, well, there are 3 people left on the enemy team, and I am about to get smoked.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly right.
Like, what can you do? Nothing.
Yeah, so I think when it comes down to whether we'd rather be, oblivious to our own failings, or whether we'd be more acutely aware than we would like to about our lack of self-worth, I'd definitely pick the latter over the former, simply because at least one provides you the opportunity to progress, even if you might not perceive it as much as other people around you.
I mean, we're both...
Because let's remember, it's also a team game. So even if you feel like a piece of shit, but your teammates are still benefiting from you, well, that's maybe not so bad, right?
I mean,
but if you're a complete basket case and hopeless and holding your team down and unable to see that, I think that's probably a much worse scenario given the
totally. I mean, we're
options.
both definitely people who err on the side of thinking about it too much, right? But I would rather err on that side than on the side of not thinking about it enough.
Yeah, definitely.
I just like learning. Yeah, what can you do?
Yeah. Well, guys, that's it for this edition of This or That with Phil and Pat. Hopefully you found this entertaining and also educational, maybe a little. I think we went on a couple of tangents there that were probably more educational than I had originally intended, but I think it's,
as I said, though,
totally fine.
I think people will forgive us for talking about useful things,
definitely.
Once in a while, just to keep things confusing.
So guys, thank you so much for listening. Really appreciate all of you checking us out. If you're listening to this on YouTube, make sure you drop it a like. That does help us out a lot for the algorithm. There's a lot of stuff in 2024 that we're going to be doing with this channel. We're hoping that we get a little bit more visibility, which would be awesome. So the more engagement you can give us, hopefully the more other people will get to see it. And so, yeah, so we really appreciate everything
But
that you guys are doing to support the channel.
please help us defeat the YouTube algorithm.
Yeah,
And
it's a long and arduous battle, but there it is, right?
absolutely. And
guys, thank you so much for tuning in this week. Really appreciate it once again. And that's all we've got. We'll talk to you next week.
thanks for listening, and see you next week, guys.